It is certainly good to see everyone here this morning. We are going to be looking at destructible deities, or we could even call them disposable deities. Those that simply are not God. Not God in the least. Let's begin in Jeremiah chapter 10. Jeremiah chapter 10. And we're going to look at the absurdity, the absurd notion of idolatry. And before we get into this, I want to make mention that you can make anything your idol. You can make anything your God. Anything at all. It doesn't have to be a statue. It doesn't have to be something made of clay or wood or stone or metal. It doesn't have to be anything like that. And everybody on earth worships something. Everybody. Whether it happens to be Jehovah God, or it happens to be some sort of homemade idol, some sort of thing made out of clay or stone or metal, or it could be a person. It could be anything. Anything can be worshipped by anyone, because we're made that way. You can't get that out of yourself, and you can't get it out of people. You're going to worship something. Now let's go to Jeremiah 10. We'll begin in verse 1. And this is just showing, we're going to look at a couple of places here, showing the absurd nature of it all. Hear the words of the Lord. So verse 1, Jeremiah 10, verse 1. Hear the words which the Lord speaks to you, O house of Israel. Thus says the Lord, do not learn the way of the Gentiles. Do not be dismayed at the signs of heaven, for the Gentiles are dismayed at them. For the customs of the people are futile. For one cuts a tree from the forest, the work of the hands of the workmen with the axe. They decorate it with silver and gold. They fasten it with nails and hammers so that it will not topple. They are upright like a palm tree, and they cannot speak. They must be carried because they cannot go by themselves. Do not be afraid of them, for they cannot do evil, nor can they do any good. Inasmuch as there is none like you, O Lord, you are great, and your name is great in might. Who would not fear you, O King of the nations? For this is your rightful due from among all the wise men of the nations. And in all their kingdoms there is none like you. But they are altogether dull-hearted and foolish. A wooden idol is a worthless doctrine. Silver is beaten into plates. It is brought from Tarshish, and gold from Uphaz. The gold of the craftsman and the hand of the metalsmith, blue and purple are their clothing. They are the work of skillful men. But the Lord is the true God. He is the living God and the everlasting King. At His wrath the earth will tremble, and the nations will not be able to endure His indignation. Here is, especially going from verses 2 to 5, we see the absurd nature of idolatry. Now we're going to get into Jeremiah chapter 44, but the absurd nature of it, and that someone has to go and has to make this idol, and has to make it to where it won't fall over. This God that could easily fall over, as we saw with Dagon just a few minutes ago, with reading there 1 Samuel chapter 5. Or these things have to be taken care of. God does not need us. He does not need us to take care of Him. He does not need it. He's from everlasting. He's from eternity going to eternity. And there's been an eternity where we didn't even exist. Okay, going into the past. We did not exist, and God did very well without us. But here you have cutting down a tree from a forest, being carved, covered in silver or gold, and nailed down so it doesn't topple, and must be carried about because it can't walk. Well, that's kind of an absurd thing that you're going to worship this. Now let's go to Isaiah chapter 44. Isaiah 44, and we just continue in this idea of that all of this is just ludicrous. Just looking at it logically. He cuts down, so verse 14, Isaiah 44, verse 14. He cuts down cedars for himself and takes cypress and the oak and secures it for himself among the trees of the forest. He plants a pine and the rain nourishes it. Then it shall be for a man to burn, for he will take some of it and warm himself. Yes, he kindles it and bakes bread. Indeed, he makes a god and worships it. He makes it a carved image and falls down to it. He burns half of it in the fire. With this half he eats meat. He roasts a roast and is satisfied. He even warms himself and says, "Ah, I am warm. I have seen the fire." And the rest of it he makes into a god, his carved image. He falls down before it and worships it, prays to it and says, "Deliver me, for you are my God." All right, how absurd is this? A man cuts a tree down. With half of it, he's going to build a fire, make his meal, and be warmed. And with the other half, he's going to carve himself a god and worship it and pray to it and say, "You are my God." Well, first off, if the God was in the tree, why did you cut it down? Number two, you just burned part of your God. All right, was that okay? And you had to carve it out into an image to be, so it doesn't look like a log. I mean, let's face it, you had to make it look like something more than just a pathetic log sitting there. But what you have is no less pathetic. Nothing at all. But once again, here is this helpless chunk of material that can do nothing for you except you can build something out of it. You can burn it and make your meal and keep yourself warm. You can do that, but beyond that, to worship it, it cannot accept your worship. There's nothing to it. It's just a tree. And that you are going to pray to it, it cannot hear nor answer those prayers, even if it could hear. But it's just a log. That's all it is. Now, this is a story that goes back a number of years, and it is very much a true story. It is in, of all places, I know you're not going to believe this, but it was in San Francisco where this happened. It was a particular public park where there was a traffic barrier. It was to keep cars from leaving the parking lot or whatever drive it was and going off into the grass. All right? And it was kind of a column, maybe 3.5 feet, something like that, rounded at the top. And someone decided this looks exactly like the image of, or what is usually regarded as an object of worship of a particular god. And I do believe it was Hindu, but I could be wrong about that. And so people began to worship this thing. Okay. And so they would, when it just caught on, I guess, is what happened. So they would leave food offerings and they would bring garlands and they would bring all these things. And the city had a problem with rats and vermin because they're coming and eating at the food that's being left, and they weren't sure quite what to do about this. And one person being interviewed in all this said, obviously, that is a god. All right, what's your proof? Well, it accepts our worship. And my first thought is, how could it reject your worship? What did you expect it to do? Walk away? Or hit your hand? What did you expect it to do to correct you to say, don't worship me? Because that would be shocking if it did. And but it's an inanimate object. What did you think it was going to do? What did you think it was going to do? It can't refuse anything. You set it there. If it doesn't like being there, it can't move itself. It's there until somebody else moved it. And finally, that's what the city decided to do. It was causing such an uproar, they decided to remove it. And now, that takes us on to something that occurred, and I haven't told this story in a number of years, but matter of fact, it was Larry Fryer who in fact confirmed that, yeah, this did happen, is a number of years back in India, and it's known as the day that Ganesh drank milk. Now, Ganesh is an elephant-headed god of wisdom under Hinduism. Okay, and some fella made the news, and it was televised and all this, that an image of Ganesh drank milk, and he had a spoon, he put milk in it, and brought it to the little figurine's trunk, and the milk disappeared. Okay, first off, if that's all Ganesh can do, a child can do that. A cat can do that. If that's all Ganesh can do, congratulations, keep on feeding Ganesh, but you're going to worship him and think there must be something great because it can take milk out of a spoon? All right, that's pathetic. And the truth about it is, has Ganesh ever done anything else? Have you ever seen him do anything else such as what one might hope an actual God would do? Because I can show you animals that can do that. Because that's simple enough. But it was a trick. It was a magic trick. It was very simply done. It actually, the image was out of a white stone, and the milk, you just couldn't see the milk trailing down the back side of the image and into a plate. You just couldn't see that. But there was a very clever man in India who wanted to show how this was done, and he in fact took a Mickey Mouse toy and did the same thing. Okay, to show, okay, so now we're going to celebrate that Mickey is drinking milk. Is that what we're doing now? Now, we're going to look at that of destructible deities in this. Let's go now back to 1 Samuel. Read for us earlier. We go back there and we just look at the problem that the Philistines had. The Philistines just had a major victory. And they just did something extremely shocking. It was so shocking that Eli fell and died from it. Eli was the high priest. He lost his 2 sons and the Ark of the Covenant in a battle. The Philistines won it, and the Philistines go walking off with the Ark of the Covenant. I think that he fell off the Ark not because his sons fell off the Ark, that he fell from his chair, from his stool, not because of the news that his sons had died, but because the Ark of the Covenant wasn't coming back. That it was taken off by the Philistines. He falls and he dies. He breaks his neck. Now the Philistines have it, so what are they going to do? Well, it's a trophy for them. They know what they've got. They know that this is a thing that is part of worship to Jehovah. They know that. And so they're going to take it as a trophy and they're going to put it in their temple of Dagon. But this is what happens. Then the Philistines took, 1 Samuel chapter 5 verse 1, then the Philistines took the ark of God and brought it from Ebenezer to Ashdod. When the Philistines took the ark of God, they brought it into the house of Dagon and set it by Dagon. All right, this is now right here with Dagon. It goes with whatever else they may have in the house of Dagon. It's something that sure, showing the might of Dagon over Jehovah. Not that they were going to worship Jehovah, because they weren't. This is victory over the God of Israel. Verse 3, and when the people of Ashdod arose early in the morning, there was Dagon fallen on its face to the earth before the ark of the Lord. So they took Dagon and set it in its place again. All right, so if Dagon is anything, why can't he just pick himself back up? If he has such might over the Ark of the Covenant, if there was a problem, perhaps he should have thrown the ark out of his temple if he had a problem with it. If there was anything concerning Dagon, why do you have to take care of him? Why is he the one falling over? Well, there is a sign here. And I would just ask the question, is this something that idol did all the time? I have a feeling that if it did, they would have fixed the problem a long time ago. that they would have gotten tired of picking him up and just secured him better. Or just done something, but all of a sudden he's falling down. Okay, well, this is coincidental. We put in the Ark of Jehovah here, and overnight Dagon fell down. Okay, that's kind of creepy, but let's put him back up. Okay, verse 4. And when they arose early the next morning, there was Dagon fallen on its face to the ground before the ark of the Lord. The head of Dagon and both of the palms of its hands were broken off on the threshold. Only Dagon's torso was left of it. So here is the next sign. You had a whole idol yesterday morning, but this morning he's broken. All right, that's no good. So therefore, neither the priests of Dagon nor any who come into Dagon's house tread on the threshold of Dagon in Ashdod to this day. And of course, this would have been written in the days of David, when this would have been written. And so to this day, meaning that's what the Philistines were still doing. But the hand of the Lord was heavy on the people of Ashdod, and he ravaged them and struck them with tumors, both Ashdod and its territory. And when the men of Ashdod saw how it was, they said, the ark of the God of Israel must not remain with us, for his hand is harsh toward us and Dagon our God. All right, they actually have to admit that. They have to admit that this all has happened because the Ark of the Covenant is here. The Ark of the God of Israel is here. They have to admit that. And so they're just going to send the problem somewhere else. And once those people discover, oh, we don't like this, they're going to send it somewhere. Eventually it's going to head back home in a very unusual way. As a matter of fact, they are testing God and what's going to happen with actually having two cows who are going to haul cows. Oxen pull carts, horses pull carts, cows don't. Cows give milk, cows make calves, but cows don't pull carts. And so the people of the Philistines, they are going to do a test of where they have a couple of cows with their calves in the barn, a couple of cows. They're going to hook them up to a wagon with the Ark of the Covenant just to see what happens, and they make a beeline right back to Israel. It shouldn't have happened. And it just shows once again to the Philistines and to Israel who is God in all of this. Now, let's talk for a moment. Let's go to Acts chapter 19. Acts chapter 19. And we see in Ephesus there a riot is started by a man named Demetrius, who is a silversmith. And there are some things that he says. So we'll begin in verse 26. This is let's just begin in verse 25. He called them together with the workers of similar occupation and said, so here is Demetrius, he's a silversmith. He calls on the other silversmiths, and they make a living making these images of Diana of the Ephesians, this local idol that has been there for who knows how long it's been there. And it is a pilgrimage site. It's also let's just face it, a tourist destination. And people would go there and they would buy these little figurines. Silver, I'm sure, was very expensive for them. But buy these figures of Diana. Okay, so Demetrius calls them all together. He called, verse 25 again, he called them together with the workers of similar occupation and said, men, you know that we have our prosperity by this trade. Moreover, you see and hear that not only at Ephesus, but throughout almost all Asia, this Paul has persuaded and turned away many people, saying that they are not gods which are made with hands. So not only is this trade of ours in danger of falling into disrepute, but also the temple of the great goddess Diana may be despised and her magnificence destroyed, whom all Asia and the world worship. I want you to notice something. That the case of Diana, or the case for Diana of the Ephesians, must be incredibly weak. Because if all it took is for one man coming in, teaching the truth, because truth has a greater power than any lie, even repeatedly lied. Okay? Generations lied. Now the truth comes in. The truth has power. And the words of God have power. And suddenly they are worried about Diana. Well, let Diana take care of herself. She should be able to handle this. Or she's bound to have very powerful friends there on Olympus or wherever she is. She's bound to have powerful friends. Just send them along and take care of this. But no, they feel like they've got to do it themselves because Diana can do nothing. And once again, the case of Diana, of convincing people that Diana is anything, must be relatively weak. Because if all it takes is this message coming in, speaking of these things, that gods that are made with hands aren't gods at all. All right, that's evidently a very powerful message. Evidently that was, and it worked in Ephesus. And he's worried about it. And from this, what do they get? They produce a riot. A riot which has to be quelled by the local government, because they are under Ephesus as under local rule as well. And Romans ruling Ephesus, ruling any place, did not like riots in the street. Suddenly there's an uproar. What's this all about? Because they're going to see you as being a rather unstable people, as someone easily emotional and ready to fight and ready to just get upset at the least little thing, just volatile. And they're not going to like that. They're not going to like that at all. And one would have to say that's precisely where paganism led. And of course we can see that from Romans chapter 1, of where the suppression of God came the substitution for Him. And it came in worshiping the creature rather than the Creator. And then came every kind of vile action. Everything that is wicked then eventually developed in all of this. Now, let's go from here to 2 Kings. Let's go to 2 Kings. It wasn't too long ago that we were here. I'm sorry, 1 Kings. Let's go to 1 Kings. 1 Kings chapter 18. 1 Kings 18. This is Elijah on Mount Carmel. And there is a demonstration that occurs here. And to begin with, verse 21. And Elijah came to all the people and said, how long will you falter between two opinions? If the Lord is God, that is, if Jehovah is God, follow Him. But if Baal, follow him. All right, you can't have both. One or the other, but you can't have both. Who's it going to be? But the people answered him not a word. They don't answer. They don't say Jehovah is God, because I think they're very fearful of their king. Ahab's not such a nice guy. He's been killing prophets. He's been killing, righteousness is having a very, very difficult go of it with a reign like his. So I think for the most part, any that might say Jehovah is God feared him. But They're not saying Baal is God. Now, while Ahab would appreciate that, Ahab would like the vote of confidence in that, they're not willing to say Baal is God either, because they also have a fear of Jehovah. They have a fear of Him. So really, they have a fear of two things. And they're kind of put themselves in a corner with Baal on one side, Jehovah on the other side, and cowardice is just keeping them right there. Do something. Do something, which is exactly what Elijah says. Now, in this demonstration, let's just sum it up. In this demonstration, you have the 450 prophets of Baal. The idea is, the challenge is, you set your sacrifice out, you set the wood out, the ox, whatever you're going to sacrifice, lay that out, and then you're going to pray to your God, and He's going to light that fire. Then, I'm going to pray to Jehovah, and we'll see what happens. None of us are going to put any flame to this wood. None of us. We're going to let the God who's being prayed to do that. And so, those the 450 prophets of Baal, they begin doing their chants, then it becomes more and more frantic, more and more grotesque, as a matter of fact, because they're cutting themselves. And nothing happens. Nothing happens. And of course, Elijah is there just to mock them. And they need to be mocked. They do. In a thing like this, they do. And then it is time for Jehovah's turn. Elijah then pours water, has water being poured over the sacrifice, over the wood, everything. So it's now soaking. And he hardly had to say anything to Jehovah God. And all of a sudden, fire comes from heaven and laps everything up. It's all gone in one fierce, powerful blaze. It is gone. And then everyone then says, Jehovah, He is God. Let's go to verse 38. Then the fire of the Lord fell and consumed the burnt sacrifice and the wood and the stones and the dust, and it licked up the water that was in the trench. Now when all the people saw it, they fell on their faces and said, the Lord, He is God. That is Jehovah, He is God. Jehovah, He is God. They now have seen it. They saw the demonstration. They've now seen it. Baal did nothing. Jehovah did something scary. Very, very frightening, to where even Ahab calmed down for a bit. Even he calmed down for a little bit, but being the man that he is, he returns back to his foolish ways. Being the man, and honestly, I don't know how you can witness that and it not affect you for the rest of your life. That I'll never say a single thing against Jehovah. And I will never, we'll just get rid of all the images of Baal. We'll just do that right now. I don't know how you can witness that and it not affect you for every remaining second of your life. I don't know how. Which is precisely what Elijah believed. Elijah, no doubt, believed, okay, things are going to be different in Israel now. They saw this. But never underestimate people's ability to go and do what they've always been doing. To disappoint you greatly. They've seen something, and it's as though it really didn't matter. That it really didn't matter anyway. While it was momentary and it was a shock and it was very awesome to see, now they're going to put that out of their mind. Now, with Ahab, he is, I don't know about anybody else. I can't answer for the rest. But with Ahab, he is going to be doing that. Now, let's go to Genesis chapter 1. Let's talk about the God of heaven. The God over all. Powerful, eternal, wise, intelligent, and creative. Beyond our abilities, really, not just to match it, but to comprehend it. Genesis 1:1, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Now, as we have said before, that the Bible has not ever revised itself, had to reverse something, had to re-edit, had to, with the coming of scientific knowledge and scientific experimentation and learning through reason and rationale and all this, suddenly saying, okay, well, we got to revise some things in here. We got to revise some things. The Bible has never had to make the first correction, going from Genesis 1:1 all the way to the book of Revelation 22:21, I think. That it has never had to make any kind of modification or back away from something. But I want you to see something. In the beginning, God. Now, in the Hebrew, that word is Elohim. That word means that of extraordinary power. Now, God has numerous names and designations. He's Elohim, as we will see in just a second. Chapter 2, first time He is called. Let's just go there. Chapter 2 in verse 4. This is the history of the heavens and the earth when they were created, in the day that the Lord God made the earth and the heavens. For the first time, that word Lord should be Jehovah. Now, I don't agree with the way some translators do things. I'm reading from the New King James, and I wish they would just go with Jehovah, but they're following the tradition of the older King James. But here, this is the first time the word Jehovah is used. And we can understand in all this that this isn't introducing somebody new. By the way of the text, we can see now we have a more full name. Elohim, yes, but also Jehovah. And I do love it when discussing matters with an atheist and we talk about the law of cause and effect. That you cannot have an effect without a cause. If something has happened, something caused it to happen. Something had to do it. Something, you cannot have just something that occurs and nothing made it happen. It just did. All right? There is a cause for it. Always. And that matter must have a cause. It is not eternal, and everybody will agree with that. Well, I say everybody. There's no telling anymore. It's such absurdity going out. And it's just a darkening of people's minds. But everyone used to agree, anyway, that matter was not eternal and that matter could not create itself. So how did it get here? And the whole idea was, well, we'll just ignore it, or we'll just make it into the Big Bang, which still is ignoring it. All right? It's got to have a cause. No matter how small you make the original bit of matter, something's got to bring it into existence. Matter can't do it. It's not eternal. How did it get there? All right, and now this is what I like, is when they then apply it to God. Okay, then, who caused God? Sounds like a great argument. Sounds like a great argument. I don't know how many times I've been posed with that one. Okay, then, if that's the case, who posed God? Well, first off, you forgot you've got a matter issue. But now, let's talk about that, because I can look in Genesis chapter 2, verse 4, and see that already answered by His very name. It's answered before you even have atheists on the earth. Moses wrote this in his day. I'm going to have to retrace that. There would have been plenty of atheists before Moses lived. But here, before it was penned, but here we have, before we get into our day and age and arguments coming in for atheism, that there cannot be a God, that here in Genesis chapter 2, the very beginning of the Bible, it's already answered in His name. And that this name, Elohim, means the self-existent one. It can also be translated the self-caused one. It's already answered. God, who is eternal, has no cause. Well, I thought cause and effect was a law. Yeah, it is a law on this physical realm that we're in, this material realm that we're in. It is, just like gravity is a law, just like all the laws of thermodynamics. Those are laws. We have numerous laws of physics inside this material realm. But God created this. He's not subject to it. He created it. He is from everlasting. He is from eternity. Something that matter can't do. And we all understand that matter slowly runs down. That's why things turn to dust. That's why that happens. Things run down. Now, let's talk for a second of modern gods. Well, there's too many of those, but and say once again that you can make anything your God. TV can become your God. A game can become your God, whether it's a computer game or whether it happens to be a sport. You're playing in the sport or you're watching the sport. Anything can become your God. A celebrity can become your God. You yourself can become your own God. And you can literally worship anything. And once again, we're hardwired to do that, to worship something, because we're not just physical beings. There is the spirit side to us. But let's talk for the moment of misunderstandings of God. We'll start with Islam. The God of Muhammad supposedly is the God of the Bible. Now, there's a reason why Muhammad did that. Muhammad could have just said it's Allah, Allah who is the moon god, worshipped among all the Arabs of the day, and just said He is God and just worked from there. But he doesn't. What he wants to do is he has heard from Jews living in the area and also from Christians living in the area of different things. And they're both talking about the prophets of Jehovah. Both of those would be. And yeah, with the Jews, they'd be talking about Moses, and they would be observing whatever laws of Moses that could be observed in the days of Muhammad. And the Christians, and who knows what denomination may have been there, but they also would have been talking about Jehovah, and they would have been talking about the Messiah as well having come. Now the Jews would have been talking about the Messiah, but not having come just yet, but sometime in the future. And Muhammad, what he did was base his own little belief off of the Bible because he saw it as being solid. He doesn't go with what the pagan worship had been in Mecca for centuries upon centuries. He goes with what he saw as being solid. Once again, going back to Acts chapter 19, the argument for Diana of the Ephesians must have been extremely weak. The argument for Allah, the moon god, must have been extremely weak, or any of those other gods must have been extremely weak. For him to have seen, yes, there is something that the Jews are saying that's extraordinary, and there's something that the Christians are saying that's also extraordinary, and he considered them to be people of the book. And for a while, he said, people of the book are being respected, and then when he gained some power, he changed on that one, drastically on that one. But note this. His idea of the God of the Bible is His own creation. He gets a little bit here, and then He fills in the gaps. And He fills in a lot of gaps. And the God that is now presented as the God with Muhammad as being the prophet, that God, Allah, is not the God of the Bible. Is not even close. That one is a respecter of persons. That one also is one that is very materialistic, and also one that wants you to commit crimes in His name, to murder in His name, to conquer lands in His name. That if you destroy a people, their property belongs to you. They're unbelievers, their property automatically should go to you. Okay? That's not the God of the Bible. That's not the God of the Bible at all. That one has, Allah really has no love, but there's a lot of contradictions in this as well. Is Muhammad the prophet or is Muhammad the God? Because I can show you where they say Muhammad is a prophet, but I can also show you where they are praying to Muhammad. And that it is well recorded among even the ancient, going back centuries, that they're praying to Muhammad. So who's God here? It seems to be rather confused in all this. But the idea of taking the Bible as being a foundation because there's something that is seen as being actually valuable and steady and stable and rock solid, using that and then creating something on your own, has been done numerous times. Numerous times. You have Catholicism, did that, continues to do that. It's full of contradictions and wickedness. You have the worship of saints. Where do you find any of that in this? And there's also something else that mimics what Muhammad was doing, is that you can go and conquer lands that aren't Christian. You can go conquer lands that aren't Catholic even. They may claim Christ, but you can go conquer them and you can just take their property. Just take their property, take their lands, take everything. You now rule over them or you just destroy them. You have every right to do that. That was the Crusades, by the way. That's precisely what the Crusades were about. But we can also talk about the God of Calvin, the God of John Calvin. Once again, not the God of the Bible. Would say that God is, but that God is definitely a respecter of persons. And that one is also one that, if you want to debate an atheist will take that straw man. The God of Calvin, atheists will take that straw man and burn it in front of you. Because it's easily done. And in that respect, I'd join the atheist with them. And if that was my idea of who God was, I'd say, well, the atheist definitely has a point here. The atheist definitely has a point. Because that's somebody else. That's quite the wicked God, and one that should never be served. But there's also what we can generally call the God of Protestantism. We can look at him too, and what is I have said before, the thumbprint of denominationalism is an unsteady doctrine, a doctrine that can be bent. It's not the same. Go back a few years and make comparison. A few years before that, make comparison. A few years before that, make comparison. If there's any change, and these days there's a lot of change, but if there's any change, that does not belong to God. That church does not belong to God, because the doctrine of Christ does not change. The doctrine of Christ is not altered ever, regardless of the century, regardless of the culture, regardless of any of that. Let's go to the book of Revelation, chapter 11, and we will finish here. And here we have a vision that John sees. Revelation chapter 11, beginning in verse 17. And we see in this vision those who are worshiping God, Jehovah God. And His Son is there. That Lamb of God is there. And that Holy Spirit is there. And we see these words being given to them, saying, we give you, verse 17, we give you thanks, O Lord God Almighty, the one who is, and who was, and who is to come, because you have taken your great power and reigned. Here are these, in my mind, these extraordinary people and angelic beings. And all of these who are there at this throne room saying these words to God. Verse 18, the nations were angry, and your wrath has come, and the time of the dead, that they should be judged, and that you should reward your servants, the prophets and the saints, and those who fear your name, small and great, and should destroy those who destroy the earth. Here are powerful words to those in this vision who are before the God of heaven. When I see the power that is evident, as Romans chapter 1 states, that is, you can see the power of God in nature, and see the power and the overwhelming intelligence, and I do mean overwhelming, of where bit by bit we make astonishing discoveries and come to places where we have to say, I have no idea how this works. I have no idea how this happened. I have no idea what occurs for this to take place. But in nature, God is the one that holds that mystery. God is the one that does it. And I can look at that power and I can know He is God. And I can know someone extraordinarily wise and good is over it all. We need to look at our lives seriously, because this is the only one we get. And now, make the corrections needed. Make the corrections. Because as we've already read today from Romans chapter 14, God will judge everyone. God will judge us all. And as we just read from Revelation chapter 11, there is a day when He will reward His saints. He will reward those who feared His name. He will reward them, and the rest will be punished eternally. That is a serious matter to be taken soberly. And look at our own lives. We ask this morning, the words are for our learning. The words are for encouragement. The words are for us to examine our own lives. And God's not going to share a place in your life. He's not going to share the top spot. He's got to be there. And that requires dedication to Him. We ask this morning, if you need to respond to the invitation, if we can help you in any way, we ask that you come as we stand and sing.